Listen up! You can get the new iPhone 16e with Apple Intelligence for just $49.99 when you switch to Boost Mobile. We pulled so many all-nighters to give you this deal, and hey, stop messing with the mic!
I'm just helping us catch people's attention. This is a great deal!
Exactly, so it doesn't need all that.
Fine.
Get the new iPhone 16e, available at Apple Store locations and the Apple Store online.
Visit your nearest Boost Mobile store for full offer details. Apple Intelligence requires iOS 18.1 or later. Restrictions apply.
This is Car Tracks with Turtle Wax. Your car says a lot about you. So if we asked your car what it would say about you, what would it say?
Listen, you dropped one of those tiny cheeseburgers under the seat like last week, and now we're both dry heaving at the stench. Do us a favor, grab some Turtle Wax, and let's get to work.
This has been Car Tracks with Turtle Wax. You are how you car.
Hello and welcome to episode number 277 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And to kick things off this week, I would like to thank some of our new Patreon subscribers. I would like to thank Michelle Finnegan and Amri Woolley. Thank you so much for subscribing to the Patreon. I love you and appreciate you every single day. And before we get into our film review this week, we have a promo. And our promo this week is for the podcast Tyrant in Training. The Tyrant in Training podcast is a weekly comedy podcast which asks guests what they would do as a tyrant of their own country. Guests answer questions such as what official title they are to be known as, what is banned on the island, and what scandal do they get involved in. Now, I was on an episode of Tyrant in Training, okay? And I am probably the worst tyrant that has ever been in training. And I don't mean that I was, particularly evil or violent or dictatorial. No, I just wanted to be left alone, which I think goes against the very idea of being a tyrant who is in charge of their own country. But it is what it is. So check out Tyrant in Training wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, this is Kevin. I am the host of the Tyrant in Training podcast, which is an improv comedy podcast where every Thursday a guest from the world of entertainment joins me to talk about how they would rule their own country. To show you what I mean, I'm going to play you some out-of-context quotes from some very lovely guests on this silly podcast. Sadly, they went mad with power.
I may be a tyrant about to be crushed by probably the Pope.
When you come back to me when you're about 45 and you're worn out from this Eurovision hellhole.
I'm not actually this much of an egotistical narcissist. I don't know, I've killed children or something. Don't try and compliment me ever.
I didn't do that, and I definitely was not drunk on ice cream.
This is an island that's based on koalas, but they all have chlamydia. I don't want to give you all my secrets. If I do, I'll probably have to kill you.
And you know what? I would vote for every single one of them. You can find a Tyrant in Training podcast every Thursday on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, and you can find us on social media, Tyrant in Training podcast. Goodbye.
So that was the Tyrant in Training podcast. I will leave the link to that podcast in the description of this episode. And honestly, go and check it out. It was so much fun recording with Kevin. He is divine. I loved it. I had a really good time. And it's also quite nice to do something outside of the realm of the paranormal, I don't often get the opportunity to do that, so it was really good fun. And our film review this week is 28 Years Later. 28 Years Later was released in 2025. It has 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb and 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's been almost 3 decades since the Rage virus escaped a biological weapons laboratory, and now, still in a ruthlessly enforced quarantine, some have found ways to exist amidst the infected. One such group of survivors lives on a small island connected to the mainland by a single, heavily defended causeway. When one of the group leaves the island on a mission into the dark heart of the mainland, he discovers secrets, wonders and horrors that have mutated not only the infected, but other survivors as well. I'm going to apologise in advance if this film review becomes long, okay? It's not often that the film review goes over 10 minutes. but this may go over 10 minutes. The film, 28 Years Later, basically follows a boy called Spike. He's 12 years old. He lives on this island called Holy Island, and his dad is taking him onto the mainland for the first time to hunt the infected, essentially. His mum is very ill. That is all that you need to know. And this film was a joy from start to finish. So I am a massive 28 Days Later fan. And I'm also a huge fan of Alex Garland's writing. So Alex Garland wrote 28 Days Later. He also wrote Warfare, which was a film that was out recently. He wrote Men, another horror film that I absolutely adored. And I think the beauty of 28 Days Later as a film was the fact that when you were watching 28 Days Later, obviously you had this sudden realization that the infected were fast and they were brutal, right? And that was terrifying in itself. But what we're also faced with is how monstrous humanity is. And that's the real horror of 28 Days Later. And I don't think that 28 Weeks Later captured any of that, and it felt like a Hollywood cash grab. Like, it didn't have the same kind of gritty, raw realness of 28 Days Later. But 28 Years Later captured all of that gritty, raw, real humanity in spades. And because I love 28 Days Later so much, I really did go to the cinema kind of preparing to be disappointed. But I felt like this was a story about survival and about how humans adapt to the world around them, and about, you know, how that adaptation often means a state of regression, you know, of a state of being that like incorporates traditional values and gender norms because that's what we know. And I also felt like this film was this exploration of what it means to be a man in this society and what it means to be a son. You know, watching this young boy who is 12 years old literally put down his Power Ranger toy to go out and hunt the infected for the first time at 12 years old, his like journey into manhood. It was just genuinely devastating to watch. And I think it would have been really easy to kind of go, well, this is about toxic masculinity and, you know, this is about how men are violent and aggressive, etc. But it wasn't. It was nuanced. There was grey areas in it. It was about what it means to be a man and what it means to be, you know, a masculine man in this new era of survival, but also what it means to have softness and care and empathy. And it also was this exploration of what motherhood means in this particular world. And oh my God, I just loved it. I loved the humanity in it. Visually, it was stunning. There is one particular scene, and if you've seen it, you will probably know what I'm going to say, but it's where Spike and his dad are running across the causeway, and it is breathtaking to watch. It looks incredible. And I saw an interview with Danny Boyle, the director, and Alex Garland, the writer, where they were talking about this particular scene, and in this scene the sky is like alive with the aurora borealis, and they had long conversations about what the sky would look like if there was just no light pollution, because there's no cities anymore, there's no big communities of people, so there's no lights that are spoiling the night sky, and what that would then look like. And I just loved watching every second of it. I also thought that they did really interesting things with the infected. So, you know, these aren't zombies, and they never were zombies. And I made the grave mistake of mentioning the Z word in a TikTok that I made about 28 years later, just out of force of habit. I called it a zombie movie. And the comments, men were rinsing me in the comments, being like, this isn't a zombie movie, they're not zombies. I know, they're infected with a virus. As a result of that, they can actually survive for a very long time. We find out that one of the infected in particular has been in the same area for, I think, 3 years. And in some cases, the virus manifests differently. So you end up with kind of different types of infected. And for some of the infected, it affects them differently. And I'm just going to say the 3 fatal words, hear me out. And I'm not going to say anything more. And I think the thing that surprised me the most about this film was the softness of it. I didn't expect it to be this beautiful commentary on death. And Sinead and I went to see it in the cinema and just bawled. Like, we both cried our eyes out. And in this world that they've created, like, death is hideous and violent and frenetic and fast. And there's also this recognition in the film that death can be beautiful and calm. And there's a section of the film where that is really explored. And I took so much away from that. And I think there's this recognition and respect of the fact that we all have to die sometime, and that's actually okay. And death doesn't have to be this destructive, explosive, vicious erasure of a person. You can give a lot of respect to somebody in death. And I'm really aware when I talk about this film that the ending was incredibly divisive. And I've tried in this review to be to not have any spoilers, because I don't want people to have big expectations going in or expect to see something in particular. So I'm not going to give away anything about the ending. But I personally loved the ending. And I thought again that it was a brilliant commentary about childhood trauma, about arrested development, which is a very real psychological phenomenon where you don't develop past a certain traumatic point sometimes. It is also a commentary on how our childhood and our childhood heroes can inform our adult actions and what that means. I think it also really nodded to the fact that in this world, in the world of 28 Days Later, which happened in 2002, from that point on, the world in England, Scotland, Wales and on the island of Ireland ended as everybody knew it. So there are lots of huge cultural moments in time that just wouldn't have happened. And that to me felt like this real moment of epiphany where I was like, of course, all of these things that we now know to be true would never have happened in this world. Oh, anyway, look, I could talk about this film for ages. I don't have any negative things to take away from this film. I loved it. I watched it twice in the cinema, 2 days in a row, which I never do. And that is saying something. And that was not just because of my particular hear me out attitude towards Samson, the infected alpha. I mean, it might have been part of it, but, you know, I watched it twice, 2 days in a row. Loved it. It is a 5-star, it's a 10-star film for me. I just adored it. Go and watch 28 Years Later. Enjoy it. If you haven't seen 28 Days Later, I would strongly recommend watching it. And 28 Weeks Later, look, it's fine. It's fine for what it is. People often, you know, slate it. It's not great, but it's also not bad. There's some really terrifying scenes in it. But I did feel like 28 Years Later was just chef's kiss. And I'm so excited to see what the next couple of films bring.
It's happening right now. The Knix Annual Warehouse Sale, July 10th through 14th at knix.com. We're clearing out the warehouse, and the savings are big. Save up to 50% on select styles from the #1 leak-proof brand in North America. This is your chance to stock up on Knix's game-changing leak-proof underwear. The soft, stylish, machine-washable underwear that handles periods, sweat, and light leaks with total confidence. Millions have made the switch to Knix, and with sizes from extra small to 4XL and tons of colors and styles, there's something for everyone. But it's not just underwear. Find big savings on revolutionary bras, swimwear, and more. From long days to late nights, everything is designed to move with you and keep you comfortable, supported, and leak-free. Raid the warehouse and try something new, or stock up on your Knix favorites. This sale only happens once a year and ends Monday, July 14th. The best deals go fast, so hurry to knix.com. That's knix.com. Save up to 50% now through July 14th. knix.com.
Instacart is on a mission to have you not leave the couch this basketball season. Because between the pre-game rituals and the post-game interviews, it can be difficult to find time for everything else. So let Instacart take care of your game day snacks or weekly restocks and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Because we hear it's bad luck to be hungry on game day. So download the Instacart app today and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply for 3 orders in 14 days, excludes restaurants.
Out here, it's not only the amazing views, but the way time stretches out a little longer. and how the breeze hits just right at the summit. With All Trails, you can discover nature's best with over 450,000 trails around the world. Download the free app today.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows home so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews all on the app. Download today.
Okay, I didn't prattle on as long as I thought I would about that. I tried to keep it as concise as possible. And it brings us, in a timely fashion, to our story this week. We're just going to dive straight into it. You've seen the title of the episode. We're going down another shape-based route. We're not talking about the Bermuda Triangle. We're talking about the Alaska Triangle. And look, Alaska's a weird place. Seems like weird things happen in Alaska. So let's get into it. All over the world, there are places where the impossible is almost a guarantee, where a great number of people and things disappear without a trace, where something can be there one moment and gone the next, and no one can explain why. The Devil's Sea, the Bermuda Triangle, they are places like that, places that have existed for centuries, possibly even since the dawn of creation. Scores of people have disappeared inside the Bermuda Triangle in just the brief moment that mankind has known about it, or has at least named it. Entire crews have entered alive and well on their ships and in their planes, and sometimes only the ships have come back out. No one knows for certain what happens to those unfortunate enough to go missing in that stretch of dangerous seas. Many have attempted to discover the true extent of the mysteries the triangle creates, but very few have risked the dangers that stem from its more northern counterpart. Encased in ragged mountains, ravaged by deadly snowstorms and blistering ice, lies the Alaska Triangle. At first, it appears nothing like its sister in the sunny seas of Bermuda or its distant brother across the world in the east. At a second glance, the Alaska Triangle is similar to the other hotspots of mysterious activities. Similar, but in some ways, entirely different. If scores of people have disappeared inside the Bermuda Triangle in living memory, then many more have disappeared up in the Alaska Triangle. Striking out from Anchorage in the south, the triangle heads north to the coast of Utqiagvik, formerly known as Barrow. From there, the territory plummets down to Juneau, briefly passing over the borders of Yukon before landing back within the Alaskan state. There are no sprawling seas with unpredictable waves and the dangers of typhoons here. When looking down at the sweeping landscape, one would find beautiful crisp snow and thick boreal forest, filled with untouched nature and wildlife. You'd be forgiven for thinking it was a peaceful place. After a storm has brushed through, the land is quiet. The animals are big with thick, luscious fur, and their paws sink into the soft, freshly fallen snow, but things are never as they seem. Any experienced outdoorsman can tell you the true dangers. And if you were ever unfortunate enough to suddenly find yourself lost in the cold and unforgiving Alaskan wilderness, chances are there will be no one else around for hundreds of miles to help you. And even if there were hundreds of people out looking for you, the very same snow that may provide a temporary shelter and water for you to drink will also be wiping away any tracks you leave behind. It could take mere minutes for new snow to cover up footprints, even less so if you are unlucky enough to be caught in one of Alaska's infamous snow squalls. It's almost like the land itself intends to trap and keep you there, and that begs the question. If it could wash away any trace of one person in only a matter of minutes with just its everyday weather, just what could it achieve with a concentrated effort? That was the question put to not one person but to a whole flight of people in 1950, when a passenger plane traversed across a town in Yukon. Locals remembered seeing the plane up above. Scheduled check-ins went off without a hitch. But then, the plane just up and vanished. On board was a team of 8 crew and 36 passengers, all of them with family waiting for them back home. Thousands of people, including locals who knew the land, and both American and Canadian officials, risked their lives in the hopes of finding these missing people. And as far as searches for missing people go, the recovery crews had a lot to work with. Yes, they were heading out into the Alaskan wilderness, but all they had to do was follow the plane's flight trajectory. And they had locals with them. They had experienced search and rescue teams. They had over 75 planes of their own up in the air, covering thousands of miles at a time. And it wasn't like they were searching for just one person. They were looking for a plane. They were looking for almost 50 people and a big piece of machinery, possibly with a large crash site that should have been easy to pick out against the white landscape. And all of those search and rescue teams in all of those planes of their own found absolutely nothing. From one instance to the next, an entire plane full of people following a travelled path just completely disappeared. The world was stunned. It was a tragedy, an unexpected, almost unprecedented tragedy. But surely it was a fluke. The passengers and crew that had flown over Yukon had been struck down by bad luck, but anyone could tell you that lightning never strikes the same place twice. But everyone would come to know that the good people of that little town in Yukon were dealing with something far more deadly than lightning, and soon the rest of America would find out too. In 1972, another plane, this time carrying House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Representative Nick Begich, and an aide named Russell Brown, set off on a trip between Juneau and Anchorage. Flying the private aircraft was experienced pilot Don Johns, a man who knew how to traverse difficult and dangerous terrain and had done so countless times before, but that flight across the Alaska Triangle would be his last. When the plane failed to land at its destination, the people grew concerned. They'd seen things like this happen before, but this time, 2 of the men on board held incredibly important positions of power within America's own government. In a desperate attempt to recover them, the nation launched the largest search and rescue operation that it had ever seen. Over 50 civilian and 40 military aircraft were commandeered to aid in the search, covering an area that stretched over 32,000 miles. That's bigger than the entire state of Maine. Thousands of people searched for over a month, and they all came back with nothing. No House Majority Leader, no House representatives, no experienced bush pilot, not even a crash site. The people called foul. Head of the FBI at the time, J. Edgar Hoover, had been in an intense and open political battle with Hale Boggs, and everyone knew it. Life for him would be so much easier once his greatest rival had been cleared from the board. So many people believe that Hoover had Boggs removed from power. Allegedly. With no bodies, no crash site, and nothing but a mysteriously empty wilderness to provide answers, the theories about what had happened to the members of Boggs's flight continued to spread. But very few people had heard about the Alaska Triangle yet, and it would take a few more disappearances for reality to finally sink in. Next came a man called Paul Lemaitre. Paul was 65 years old, and unlike the ones who had gone before him into the unknown, Paul was surrounded by people. Hundreds of people, in fact. Paul was just about to finish his first marathon. Up ahead of him was the last turn before he headed straight for the finish line, a mere 200 feet away. Around him were other runners, spectators, and race officials. And 200 feet away from him lay the safety of his own home and family. But just before turning the corner, Paul stopped running. He then took off the tag with his race number and handed it to a race official. The two talked for a moment, not really of anything important, but something caught the race official's attention. They turned around for a second, and when they turned back, Paul was gone. It quickly came out that Paul hadn't finished the race, even though he'd been right there at the finish line. A search was quickly launched. Unlike the people who had disappeared before him, Paul had vanished right under hundreds of people's noses, and he had been on foot. The area that he could have walked in the time that it took for the official to realise that he had gone missing was much smaller than it would have been if he had been in a car or a plane. And because there was a marathon going on, there were state troopers and first responders already at the scene. Teams of mounted troopers, mountain rescuers and even trained dogs set off into the wilderness surrounding the area where Paul had last been seen. And they would all come back empty-handed. Not even the dogs had picked up his scent. Paul, like the people who had gone before him, just vanished without a trace. And the strange disappearances only continued. In 2013, Alan Foster, a pilot with almost 10,000 flight hours under his belt, somehow went missing shortly after takeoff. Before then, he'd given no indication that anything was wrong, either with himself or with his plane, and radar couldn't place anything unusual about his flight pattern before he disappeared. The only thing that was somewhat out of the ordinary was that he had dropped to an altitude of 1,100 feet, possibly to get a better look at the landscape, before he vanished. After Alan went Richard Griffiths, an experienced outdoorsman and inventor out on the hunt to prove the value of his latest invention. It was a type of survival cocoon meant to protect its user against the dangerous elements of the wilderness. Richard set off into the Alaskan wilderness, the perfect place to test his new creation. But months went by and Richard still hadn't come back. Eventually, people reported him missing, and an investigation was able to recover some of his last known whereabouts. It turned out that Richard had boarded a bus that took him out to a lodge near White River in Yukon. He stayed there for a while before packing up his things and leaving, never to be seen again. And I know that at first glance these disappearances don't sound that mysterious. If anything, some of them, especially Richard's, can be easily explained away. Alaska, after all, is not for the weak or the unlucky. Bad weather, dangerous terrain, and a lonely wilderness would bring most of us to our knees. But there's a bit more to it than that. Since 1988, over 16,000 people have disappeared while inside the Alaska Triangle. Some of them were lone hikers like Richard, some of them were passengers on planes, but some of them were also locals, born and raised within the sparse pockets of humanity and lived inside the triangle itself. The number is staggering. In fact, it's more than twice the national average and means that somewhere between 500 and 2,000 people go missing there every year. When you think about it like that, suddenly the Alaska Triangle becomes much more sinister. But what is it about the triangle that steals away so many of us? Yes, there is dangerous landscape to take into consideration, but surely there is something else to blame for the sheer numbers that go missing within its borders. Some, just like they do with the Bermuda Triangle and the Devil's Sea, believe that it has everything to do with energy, specifically energy vortexes. According to some, these vortexes tend to move in two certain directions. First is clockwise, where the vortex follows the path of a clock in an upwards motion. Those who have experienced an energy vortex like this claim that it was a beautiful thing. They say that it promotes healing, meditation, creativity, and self-exploration. People come back feeling charged and full of life and ready to take on anything that the world can throw at them. Other instances of these positive energy vortexes can be found in the Egyptian pyramids, at Stonehenge, and the deserts of Sedona. But for the other kind of vortex, they are said to spiral downwards anti-clockwise. Instead of healing, these vortexes are said to drain and deplete. They spread sickness and disease. They cause depression, disorientation, confusion, and even nightmares. Some say that they can even cause a person to hallucinate. Search and rescue workers have often come back complaining about hearing what sounded like an angry swarm of bees. When they hear the bees, they know not to trust their own eyes and their other senses, especially their sense of direction. Both of these types of vortexes can cause electromagnetic fields that disrupt navigation systems and communication. Some say, even time and space itself. Compasses can sometimes be as much as 30 degrees off, and people have said that they have travelled great distances in a short amount of time without knowing how, almost like they had stepped through a doorway along the way. Another explanation for the strange disappearances all across the triangle are UFOs. There have been a large number of sightings in and around Alaska, enough to rival sightings seen in large cities, even though Alaska itself is sparsely populated. One of the most documented sightings comes from 1986, when Japan Airlines Flight 1628 was on its way from Iceland to Anchorage. Its flight path took it through the Alaska Triangle, and there it would spot the seemingly impossible. The pilots, the crew, and the passengers on board all reported seeing 3 unidentified flying objects that looked like flying lights. These lights chased the plane at incredibly high speeds, often disappearing and reappearing again in different places. Both military radar and the Federal Aviation Administration would confirm that something else was in the air with Japan Airlines Flight 1628 that day, although they wouldn't say what. Further evidence of alien activity in the Alaska Triangle can be found in the emerging cases of cattle mutilation, where dead cows have had their eyes, tongues, udders and genitalia removed with surgical precision. But, as uninhabited as Alaska may seem, the truth is that people have been living there for centuries. The indigenous people of Alaska have made their home inside the triangle for generations, and they have witnessed firsthand the tricks the triangle can play on the mind. They offer another explanation for the strange occurrences that happen within its borders. An explanation that makes the hairs on the back of your arms stand on end. Stalking through the Alaskan wilderness is the Qualipiluit. She is half woman, half sea creature, and her favourite prey is unsuspecting children. She is known to spirit away young children left unattended near bodies of water. Some say she eats them, some say she raises them as her own. Either way, the children never make it back to their families. And the Qualipiluit has a male counterpart. Half man, half otter, the Kushtaka is said to shapeshift. He can take on the form of a man or a monster or whatever it is that a person most wishes to see. And he can use any voice. Screaming women, crying children, the call of a loved one. The Kushtaka uses everything at his disposal to lure his victims away into the wilderness. Once he has his victims in his clutches, the Kushtaka could prove to be kind. He could lead a person back to safety, or he could help stop them from freezing in the snow. But then again, some of the ways a Kushtaka is said to help stop a person from dying of exposure is to transform them. It is said that the Kushtaka will distract its victim with visions of their loved ones while it works, changing a person from human into another Kushtaka. Once the transformation is complete, the person will never have to fear the cold again. But then, they won't exactly be able to return home either. The indigenous people of Alaska believe that the Kushtaka are greatly responsible for the number of missing people in the Alaskan Triangle, but they also offer another explanation, one that we have already discussed here today. They claim that the Alaskan wilderness is littered with doorways. These doorways are fueled by energy that is often accompanied by the sound of what appears to be a swarm of angry bees. So perhaps we have already uncovered more of the truth behind why so many people have disappeared right from under our noses. Perhaps people have already been telling us the answer for centuries. We just refuse to listen. Look, before I say anything else about this, right? If an Indigenous person tells me this place is weird shit happens, there are scary entities that are going to drag you down into the abyss, there are shape-shifting entities that are tricksters that will lure you into potentially the abyss, or they might save your life depending on how they're feeling. If they say there are doorways fueled by energy that sounds like angry swarms of bees, I'm listening to them. Indigenous people have lived on this land for thousands of years. I'm listening to them. Okay, that's what's happening. I'm listening. And I'm tipping my hat to them. I'm nodding. I'm going, thank you. Thank you very much for telling me this information. And I'm packing up my little bindle and I'm leaving. And I mean, granted, there is nowhere in the world that I would rather be less than out in the wilderness, particularly if it was snowy and cold. And I think I also need to reference the fact that the people who have gone missing in the Alaska Triangle are real people. They are real people who have gone missing and presumably lost their lives. They have left behind real families that will have been devastated, whose lives will have been irrevocably changed by their disappearance. So I don't want to trivialise the fact that these are real people that disappeared in very real circumstances, regardless of what the cause of that might be. So I want to just make that very clear. If I make jokes, I'm not trying to trivialise anything. I am very much aware that these are real people who have presumably lost their lives. I also think, right, you have to recognise the fact when you're talking about places like the Alaska Triangle, like the Bermuda Triangle, it is harsh terrain. Obviously, the Bermuda Triangle, like we've spoken about before, you know, there seems to be typhoons, there seems to be storms and squalls that kind of blow up all of a sudden, which can account for a lot of the disappearances, etc. And actually, we have to be realistic about the Alaska Triangle too, that there are, you know, snowstorms, it is rugged, remote wilderness, it is isolated, there are issues with the weather, the terrain is harsh, the snow, like I said, can erase tracks in literally minutes, making it easy for people to vanish without a trace, right? We cannot lose sight of that when we're talking about this. I do think it's incredible that the 1950 and 1972 plane disappearances, that there were no crash sites recovered. They didn't, you know, like when a plane crashes in the sea, obviously it is a lot more difficult to recover any parts of said plane. When a plane crashes over land, you would like to think that with extensive searches that were involved, that you'd find something to say, hey, there was a crash. Here is some evidence of it. I would also like to point out, and this is a bit of a tangent, but Paul Lemaitre, right? I think that's how you say his surname, disappeared, you know, within sight of hundreds of spectators while running a marathon. And I have never run a marathon, but my dad used to run ultra marathons on like tough terrain. And he has told me stories about running ultra marathons, like one story in particular that has always stuck with me, where it was really hot and they just didn't have enough water at the water stations in the marathon. It was unseasonably hot weather. So obviously people were drinking more and more and more. And as a result, people were super dehydrated. My dad said at one point he stopped a random walker and said, please, can you please tell me you have some water that I can drink? Like, that's how bad it was. And he said he remembers he was running and he sort of, because this was a time when there was no trackers, there was no apps, there was, you know, nobody was counting your steps or whatever. And he fell into stride with a runner. And he said to him, do you know how long we have left? Do you know how many miles we have left to go? And the runner didn't answer. And my dad said he turned and looked at him. And the man was wide-eyed, foaming at the mouth, flailing. And my dad realised that this man was having some sort of seizure, probably from dehydration and the strain on his body, but he was still running. His body was in complete autopilot and was still running. This man was then sort of tackled to the ground by a medical team who had also copped and noticed that this man was not doing well, and he was fine afterwards, just to be clear. But what it does highlight is that running a marathon in, you know, terrible terrain, you know, if you're dehydrated, whatever, it can have crazy effects on your body, but also it can have crazy effects on your brain. People can hallucinate, they can kind of lose the ability to function, like their cognitive function can disappear. So, I do wonder if something happened to this man because of running this marathon that caused him to sort of go out into the wilderness or something. Again, no trace from being found. It is weird, like it's freaky. It's weird. But if you disappear in the wilderness, you fall under a hedgerow, you might not be found. Wild animals come and take your body away, you might not be found. So I do think that these stories are weird, they're crazy, they're devastating. I mean, it must be awful for the families involved. But you are dealing with incredibly difficult terrain, an incredibly difficult landscape. But then when you hear the statistics, like there's some statistics that say it's over 20,000 people have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, which is more than twice the national average. Now that is a lot of people to disappear. Like annually 500 to 2,000 people disappear. That's one person a day missing, disappearing off the face of the earth. At least one person a day, you know what I mean? There's loads of people disappearing. And of course I understand that the number is going to be higher than the national average if you're in a place where the terrain is fundamentally more difficult, where you've got worse weather conditions, where, naturally the landscape is out to get you. Like, obviously there's going to be a higher number of disappearances, right? But twice the national average? That just seems wild. I do think as well, right, with this talk of energy vortexes, you guys know how I feel about a portal or a vortex or whatever. I'm always like, boo, thumbs down, don't really get on board with it. It's interesting that these places of positive energy vortexes are like the pyramids, Stonehenge. Do people go to these places, and because you're seeing somewhere that you've read about in books for years and it's so awe-inspiring, is that why you feel all that positive energy? Right? Or were these big wonders built in these places because there was an energy vortex there already and ancient people thought, hey, this might be a good place to build something cool because there's this energy vortex? And listen, if people are saying, if you hear a sound that's like angry bees, you know that you've stepped into vortex territory. That's weird, man. I'm never setting foot in this wilderness. I'm not doing it. Like, is that simply a case where it's like there's crazy energy in the air and it's crackling, swarming like angry bees, and that's why people are hearing that sound? And if Indigenous people are saying shit like that, like I said, if Indigenous people are saying it, I'm listening. You know what I mean? I'm going, yeah, all right, I hear you. You know the land. You've been here for thousands of years. You get it. And also, if UFOs are visiting these places, not that I want to think about UFOs visiting anywhere, but if they are visiting these places, surely they would have the ability to find places that had high energy. Because that'd be pretty interesting if you're a UFO, if you're an extraterrestrial and you're coming down to Earth to check things out. Would you be going to places where there's naturally higher static energy in the air? And I included this stuff about UFO and extraterrestrial activity, right? I hate talking about UFOs because they freak me out so much. I hate the Japan Airlines Flight 1628 Sich in 1986 because it scares me. I hate talking about cattle mutilations because I always go around the houses when I'm thinking about cattle mutilations because I'm like, I understand that bacteria will target soft parts of the body first. That makes sense. But when these things are happening overnight, is it bacteria? Bacteria is not working that quickly. Is it particular animals or predators? I don't know. Why would aliens want cow genitals? It doesn't make any sense to me. It freaks me out. Is it possible that at some point in time, scientists are going to go, you know what, there is a weird energy in this place, and this is what this weird energy is. It is natural, but it is also some sort of weird phenomenon that only happens in certain places. Like, I would not be surprised if that happened at some point with places like the Alaska Triangle. But for me, the long and short of it is, I'm never going there. And if you ever hear a story that I have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, please know that I was dragged there against my will, and please, somebody investigate. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Do not forget to go and listen to the Tyrant in Training podcast. If you have a story that you would like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
Hey, you know what would make your customer service help desk way better? Dumping it and then switching to Intercom. But you're not quite ready to make that change. We get it. That's why Finn, the world's leading AI customer service agent, is now available on every help desk. Finn can instantly resolve up to 80% of your tickets, which makes your customers happier and gets you off the customer service rep hiring treadmill. Finn by Intercom, the leading customer service AI agent, now available on every help desk.